everyone, this is Axel Paxel back with another tutorial, and this time we will be focusing on how to make some gold non-metallic metal. So first off, I'm starting by mixing a base color. This is Scrofulous Brown mixed with a little bit of black to darken it. And I've also added some red into this mix. You want the color to be somewhat tinted towards the almost like, I wouldn't say green, but it's not yellow. If you're using a yellow, it will not look like gold. So here I've experimented a little bit. Now I'm applying a loaded brush. So what you do then is you load your brush with your base color, and then you dip your brush into your highlight color. I'm using Ice Yellow from Vallejo. So in the beginning you apply a very little pressure, and as you move along and proceed towards the midtones, you can start by applying more pressure. You can see how my brush is curving as I put the paint down in the end of the loaded brush sequence. So I load the brush, and then the Ice Yellow is slightly out of camera focus there. If you load your brush with a little bit too much of the highlight color, you can wipe off some of it, like I just did, on your thumb. Just be careful not to mix it up on the before you apply the paint onto the model. So a word about paint consistency. The base color should be a layer consistency paint. Which means that you should add a little bit of water to it so that it is slightly so that it has a little bit more water to it, but not that it's too runny. It's not supposed to be like a glaze. And then for the loaded brush highlight, the Ice Yellow, you only add a little bit of water. It's almost straight out of the bottle actually. So here I'm mixing actually a glaze. This is pure white, model color ivory. We're just experimenting a little bit here, and I've added quite a bit of water to that. So you can do that. You can glaze over those parts where you want the most highlight to be. So now you can see I've switched up the palettes. This is a well palette. This works great if you're working with glazes. In order to maximize the contrast between light and dark, you want to create dark spots on the armor as well. And you can see how much I add water to this mix. There's a lot of water, it's very runny, and it's a mix of flat red from Vallejo and model color black. Here you can see how the armor will look like if you proceed with the hints and tips I give you. So yeah, you can see how runny that is, and as I apply this paint on my thumbnail, you can see that it leaves very little paint marks. So now I'm applying some of the glaze that I just made in the dark recesses where I believe that shadow would hit the model. I'm going for a center highlight here. Although it's not very obvious at the moment, it will start to make a little bit more sense as we go along. But since this armor plate is slightly curving, I want to create the illusion that it's curving a little bit more than it actually is, so I add some dark spots the recesses of the plates itself. Because light is hitting it from the center, light would also hit between the chest areas here, the chest plates. So I'm doing a loaded brush here as well. If you're painting on a small surface using the loaded brush, be sure to not add do not load your brush with too much of the base color or too much of the highlight color if you're painting on a smaller area. The armor plates, chest pieces were slightly large, so I could load it quite a bit with the loaded brush, but if you're painting on a smaller surface, you need to add less. So you start by gently applying the highlight, and then you continue painting. Here I noticed that I had a little bit too much white on my brush, so I wiped some of it off, and then I continued with the loaded brush as well. Because you're working with a paint with a little bit of water added to it, the drying times is extended, so you don't need to be worried that it will dry immediately, like if you were to paint straight out of the bottle, which you should never do if you want to make something a little bit better than tabletop, that is. So here I'm filling in some spots where on the armor where the original base coat was a little bit shining through. So you can do this because in essence all the midtones that you see on the chest plates are basically a mix between ice yellow and the base coat that you have. So if you want to go over some of the areas, you can simply mix ice yellow with your base coat, and then it will basically be the same color as your mid-tone. The model itself is called the a word about the light on the model here. It's a little bit too bright, and I didn't reset that, so I'm sorry for that. But here you can see how the dark spots on the armor actually helps pull off that non-metallic look. Of course, I will need to go over it. I'm not that happy with the left armor plate, the left that you can see looking at the screen. So I will go over that, I think. I can't remember, I painted this for her quite some time ago. Yeah, the model is called the Storm Giant. I had a brain fart earlier, I couldn't remember the name. It's called the Storm Giant, and the sculpt is made by Duncan, the Shadow Luca. You should definitely check out his works. He makes some awesome models, and this particular model was actually gifted to me by Prince of War, a friend of mine, Marie. yeah, she runs her own 3D printing company, so she actually printed this for me, and if you are interested in purchasing a similar model, you can do so by going to printsofwar.com. So here I'm adding some reflections on the armor. Here you need to be extremely careful, because obviously you've done your loaded brush, so if you were to paint too much over reflection points or do something wrong here, you have to go over the area with a new loaded brush, or you have to do repairs, so that can become quite tedious if you have to do that. So what I do here is that I basically paint a small a really small dot using my brush, and in some places I paint a straight line from that dot, and then I paint a new dot with a space between it, so that it looks like light is bouncing off on the chest plate. I'm going a bit back and forth on the model now. These areas will need to be darkened, obviously, because light is hitting it from the center area. So it's natural that the chest piece will be more dark in the recesses of the corners of this chest piece that I'm working on right now, and it helps to really build up that illusion of a non-metallic metal. I would advise using a well palette for this, because it's better at keeping the same consistency of the glaze. If you were to use a wet palette, and I used to do this, if you create glaze on a wet palette, water will seep into the paint and it will change its consistency. So it becomes very hard to work for a longer duration of time with that same paint if it were on a wet palette, because it changes consistency. You're in essence working with a paint that you have very little control over. It might be fine at one point in time, and then it goes like 20 minutes passes, and then you're working with, in essence, a different paint. So you have to remix that, and yeah, use a well palette when you're working with glazes is my so here I'm just repairing some of the spots on the armor. Yeah, I should definitely call out my newest patrons. Since last time I've gotten 3 more, which may not sound like a lot, but it means a lot to me, because they are the ones that in essence are making this possible for me, because it takes a lot of time editing, and I'm really grateful for all the support that I can get. So these 3 people are Julio Estrada, Jainen, I think, and I think it's called, I think it's pronounced, and Xrim. So thanks a lot, guys, for supporting me, and I hope you can find some value in this and my future videos. And if you're not one of my patrons, you can find a link to my Patreon page on my video description here on YouTube. And yeah, I offer some exclusive tutorials for patrons, and yeah, I call out your name in my future video, and I also thank you on the end of all my videos if you were to support me. Right now I mixed a mid-tone between the base color and the ice yellow from Vallejo. It's I think it's a light layer consistency. You can see that it leaves very little marks when it dries. I wanted that area to be a little bit brighter because it's natural for light to shine on that part as well as a secondary reflection. The model needs to look nice no matter how you tilt it. So getting these spots are crucial actually if you were to like add your miniature to a competition or something. You need it to look good from all sides. All right. So here I can't remember what I'm doing. I'm probably mixing its video is sped up as well. Yeah, I'm simply mixing a new color by adding flat red and black, and I want to create some more interest to the chest plates because they are rather large. So what I do here is that I add some freehand work to them. Obviously you need to be very careful here because you're painting over areas that you already have a nice transition on, and if you were to paint a little bit wrong here, then you would have to repair it by creating a mid-tone, which can be done, and I did it a couple of times, but if you were to mess up a lot, then it may not look as nice. So I'm using a very fine tip brush for this. It's an unusual brush. I don't know any other miniature painters that actually use this brand, but I'm having much success with these. I think they're really nice. They're called Feldherr. I will leave the name in the description. I'm really satisfied with these brushes. They have long bristle hairs, and yeah, so it's a lot of you can hold a lot of paint in the bristles. Yeah, so here you can see that I'm adding a white line almost underneath the black line, which will give the lines themselves a little bit more of a 3D feel. The consistency of the paint that you're doing this with should not be very strong. It should be like a light layer consistency, because if you were to paint with a too thick consistency, it will look very jarring and it will not look good at all. And the line that you're painting underneath should always be thinner than the original line. So these details are kind of hard to actually pull off. Out of all the techniques that you see in this video, these are perhaps the most important or the most difficult parts, I think. So this step is optional, obviously, but I wanted to show it as well. So here I've added a little bit more white into the ice yellow mix, and it still has a fairly watery consistency. It's not a glaze consistency because you would have no control over it, but it's a layer consistency. And I'm adding this color in places where most light would hit it, and because of the center highlight, the highlight points would be higher on the edges that are somewhat closer to the center, if that makes sense. Like this area here, it's closer to the center of where the highlight is hitting the model, so I go over that spot more with the more highlight color, or the wider highlight color. Now I'm adding some dots to it, so that it seems that light is like bouncing off of the surface. This will add some more interest to the piece itself. For this I'm using pure ivory, model color ivory from Vallejo. I think it's a Spanish brand, so actually it's called, because double L is pronounced as like a J, so it's actually Vallejo, I think, but that just sounds like not very good in English, so I actually just call it Vallejo. So here I've actually continued painting the helmet as well. If you guys want me to add a tutorial for the helmet as well, I have the footage, but I didn't include it in this video in order to shorten it a little bit. But yeah, I could add that as well. One word on the loaded brush: if you mess up in a way, you can just paint over it. I have done that many times on the left chest plate. I never got very satisfied with it, so I think I painted over the left chest plate like maybe 3 or maybe 4 times even. So that's always an option if you're not satisfied with the look. This is similar to the loaded brush technique on the plates, but because I'm working on a smaller area, it's a little bit more difficult. So if you were to practice the loaded brush, I would practice on a larger area first and then move on to smaller areas, because you need to be very careful with not loading your brush with too much of the highlight color, because then you actually miss out on the midtones, and the midtones are very important for creating that non-metallic metal look. Yeah, so I was not very happy with that part there, as you can see me trying to wipe off the paint, but it's already dried. Yeah, I could have cut that out, but yeah, it's actually kind of nice that you see that I also make mistakes, and I'm in no way an expert on this technique either. I think I can improve a lot, especially on when I'm working on smaller areas. But yeah, practice makes you a lot better. So now it's starting to look quite nice, actually. So I haven't included that part in the video, I think, but for the side areas on the chest armor, I actually just made a layer consistency paint of a mid-tone between the ice yellow and the base coat, and then I painted the sides because light would also be hitting those sides as well, and I also added some glaze to the recesses on the sides of this stomach abs area, in the recesses, of course. So one thing that you should be always focusing on when you're trying to pull off a non-metallic metal look is that you want extremes between the dark and the light portions of the armor or the metal. The darker the darkest areas are, and the brighter the brightest areas are, the more shine the metal will have. It's perfectly normal or it's perfectly possible to make a non-metallic metal that doesn't contrast that much, but the metal itself will appear a little bit duller. So it depends on what kind of look you're actually trying to achieve. I can see that the new trend in non-metallic metal at the moment is like sort of like weathered non-metallic metal. And I might do tutorials on that at a later time. I should tell you all that I don't expect to be releasing a lot of videos this school semester because I have what's it called in English? External practice, which means that I'm basically 8 hours at work each day. And I'm not getting paid for it. It's a part of my education to become a psychologist. So and it's obligatory, so I have to attend, which doesn't leave that much time for painting because I have 2 children as well. So I hope to at least create 1 video a month, but if I'm unable to do so, I will of course pause my Patreon. I don't think that anyone should be charged if I'm not actually putting content out there. But I will eventually start creating much more content again after this school semester is over. This is a long-term project for me, so I want to continue painting and continue making content more accessible out there. So it's nearing the end of the video now. If you actually watched through the whole video, thank you so much. If you're just skipping to the last parts in order to see what the result is, thanks for that as well. I'm grateful for I'm grateful for you watching any parts of it actually. And a special thanks to my supporters on Patreon. It's you that make this possible. These are my first 10 supporters, and this wouldn't be possible without you. So thank you.